The handcuffs clicked around my wrists with a sound that echoed through my living room like a judge's gavel. I was still wearing the black dress from my baby's funeral that morning, the fabric still damp from tears I thought had finally stopped. My mother-in-law, Francine, stood behind Detective Morrison, her voice carrying that special tone she reserved for her greatest performances. "I told you she was unstable, Detective. A mother knows these things. I've been watching her for weeks, documenting everything." The detective, a woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, kept her expression neutral as she recited words that felt surreal. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're being detained for questioning in the death of Noah Whitmore. You have the right to remain silent." The words blurred together as I stared at the family photos on our mantel. Noah's hospital picture from just 8 months ago, his tiny fist wrapped around my finger, his perfect rosebud mouth. How did we get from that moment to this nightmare? "Mommy!" My 6-year-old daughter, Penny, stood in the hallway clutching her stuffed rabbit mister. Hoppy so tight his button eye looked ready to pop off. Her dark hair was still in the braids I'd fixed that morning with shaking hands, trying to maintain some normalcy in our shattered world. She looked so small against the doorframe, but her eyes held something I'd never seen before. Not fear, something else. Determination. "It's okay, sweetheart," I managed to say, though nothing about this was okay. "Mommy just needs to talk to the police officer for a little while." Francine immediately swooped toward Penny. "Go to your room, child." This isn't for young eyes, but Penny didn't move. She stood there, studying her grandmother with an intensity that made Francine falter. "Penelope, I said go to your room, now." My husband Garrett finally found his voice from where he'd been frozen by the window. "Mom, stop, let her be." His face was ravaged with grief, his tall frame hunched like he'd aged 10 years in the past 6 hours. He couldn't even look at me, his own wife, as the detective prepared to take me away. His mother had been filling his head with poison all morning, and I could see the doubt creeping in like frost on glass. "Garrett, your wife needs help," Francine said, her hand touching his shoulder with practiced maternal concern. The signs were all there. The crying spells, the exhaustion, the way she'd sometimes just stare at Noah without picking him up. "I tried to warn you. Postpartum mothers, they snap sometimes. It's not their fault, but we have to face reality." "That's not what happened." The words tore from my throat. "I would never hurt Noah. Never. He was my baby, my perfect little boy. I checked on him at 5 this morning and he was sleeping so peacefully I let him rest." "You were awake, Francine. You saw me make coffee. You told me to wake him up and I said I'd give him a few more minutes of sleep. You were the one insisting. On rigid schedules." Francine's eyes welled with perfectly timed tears. "Listen to her, Detective. She's trying to blame me now. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The deflection, the paranoia. I've seen this before in my work at the women's shelter. Mothers who can't cope sometimes do terrible things and then can't face what they've done." That was rich, considering Francine had volunteered at that shelter for exactly 3 months, 20 years ago, and only because the country club required community service hours. But she wielded those 3 months like a doctorate in psychology, whenever it suited her narrative. Detective Morrison stepped forward. "We'll sort this all out at the station, Mrs. Whitmore. The medical examiner will determine the exact cause of death, and then we'll have more clarity." The cause of death was his mother. Francine's voice rose to a theatrical pitch. "She gave him medicine last night without telling anyone. She was alone with him this morning. She's been spiraling for weeks. Dennis, tell them about last Tuesday." My father-in-law, Dennis, a man who hadn't disagreed with his wife in 35 years of marriage, cleared his throat. "She did seem overwhelmed at dinner on Tuesday. Mentioned she wasn't sleeping well. Of course I wasn't sleeping well. I had an 8-month-old baby who was teething and a mother-in-law who had practically moved into my guest room to supervise my every move. But in this moment, every normal struggle of motherhood was being twisted into evidence against me. That's when Penny walked straight through all of us adults, her little feet deliberate on the hardwood floor. She bypassed her grandmother's attempt to catch her arm, ignored her father's confused look, and walked right up to Detective Morrison. Her small hand reached out and tugged on the detective's sleeve. The room went completely silent. "Officer, Penny said, her voice clear and steady in a way that made every adult in the room freeze. "Should I show you what Grandma really did to baby Noah?" Life before that morning was already a delicate balance of keeping peace while slowly suffocating. I'd married Garrett Whitmore 4 years ago in what I thought was a fairy tale beginning. He was everything I'd dreamed of after my disaster of a first relationship, stable, kind, from a good family. He'd accepted Penny, my then 2-year-old daughter from that previous relationship, without hesitation. "She's part of you, which means she's part of me now," he'd said on our 3rd date, and I'd fallen in love with him right there in that Italian restaurant. But fairy tales don't account for mother-in-laws like Francine Whitmore. From our first meeting, Francine made it clear I wasn't what she'd envisioned for her oldest son. "Garrett tells me you're a graphic designer," she'd said, the word graphic designer dropping from her lips like she was saying carnival worker. "How creative. And you have a daughter already. How modern." Every compliment came wrapped in barbed wire, delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. When we announced our engagement, Francine threw us an engagement party that was really a showcase of what she considered Garrett's potential matches. She introduced me to everyone as Garrett's girlfriend and her daughter, even though the ring was clearly visible on my finger. Her friend Margaret cornered me by the punch bowl to tell me how brave I was, taking on the Whitmore family expectations. Francine had such hopes for Garrett marrying the Patterson girl. They own half of downtown, you know. But Garrett loved me, and that felt like enough armor against his mother's passive aggression. We bought a beautiful colonial just 3 blocks from his parents, because Garrett wanted to stay close to family. "Mom means well," he'd assured me. "She just takes time to warm up to people." 4 years later, I was still waiting for that warmth. When Penny started kindergarten, Francine volunteered to pick her up on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I thought maybe she was trying to bond with her step-granddaughter. Instead, she enrolled Penny in an etiquette class without asking me. "The child needs refinement," she told Garrett when I protested. "Sienna lets her run wild." "Did you see her eating with her fingers at Sunday dinner?" Penny had been eating French fries. Everything shifted when I got pregnant with Noah. Suddenly, I went from being an inadequate wife to an incompetent vessel carrying her real grandchild. Francine started dropping by daily with prenatal vitamins she insisted were better than what my doctor prescribed, books on child development with dozens of sticky notes marking important sections, and constant commentary on my weight gain, exercise routine, and work schedule. "You're still working?" She'd gasp every week like it was a fresh shock. In my day, expectant mothers knew their place was preparing the nest. Never mind that I worked from home and needed the income since Garrett's salary at the engineering firm wasn't quite enough for our mortgage and Penny's needs. When Noah was born, Francine practically set up camp in our guest room. She arrived the day we came home from the hospital with 3 suitcases and an announcement: "New mothers need guidance." "I've cleared my schedule for the next 6 months." 6 months. I looked at Garrett desperately, but he was so enchanted with his new son, he just said, "That's so generous, Mom. Sienna needs all the help she can get." Help. That's what they called it when Francine criticized how I held Noah, insisted my breast milk wasn't rich enough because I was vegetarian, and rearranged his nursery twice because the feng shui was disturbing his sleep patterns. She bought a baby monitor for the guest room so she could listen to him at night, often rushing in before I could even get out of bed when he cried. "You need your rest," she'd say, but what I heard was, "You're not capable of caring for him properly." The week before Noah died, things had reached a breaking point. I'd found Francine in the nursery at 3 a.m., just standing over his crib, watching him sleep. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was checking his breathing because I'd put him down incorrectly after his 1 a.m. feeding. I told Garrett the next morning that his mother needed to go home. We argued, our first real fight since Noah's birth. "She's trying to help Sienna. She raised 3 successful children. She's undermining me at every turn. I can't breathe in my own home. You're being dramatic. Maybe Mom's right about the postpartum hormones affecting your judgment." That stung more than any of Francine's barbs. My husband was starting to believe his mother's narrative that I was an unfit mother, struggling with postpartum depression. The truth was, the only thing depressing me was Francine's constant presence and criticism. The morning Noah died, I'd woken at 5 a.m., like always. But for once, he wasn't crying. I'd stood outside his door, listening to his white noise machine, and made the decision to let him sleep. Every parenting book said to let sleeping babies lie. I made coffee, sat on our back deck, and watched the sunrise, thinking maybe things would get better once Francine finally went home. I had no idea I was giving her the perfect opportunity to destroy my life. At 6:15 a.m., I pushed open Noah's nursery door, expecting to see him stirring in his crib, maybe playing with his feet like he'd started doing recently. The morning light filtered through those airplane-patterned curtains I'd spent hours picking out, casting little shadows across the room. Noah was lying on his back, perfectly still, his arms at his sides. Something about that stillness made my chest tighten before my brain could process why. "Noah, baby?" I whispered, approaching the crib. His skin looked wrong in the morning light, too pale, almost waxy. When I touched his cheek, the cold shot through my fingers straight to my heart. I yanked my hand back, then immediately reached for him, pulling his tiny body against my chest. "No, no, no, Noah, wake up, baby, please wake up." My scream brought the house crashing to life. Garrett burst through the door first, still in his pajama pants, his hair sticking up at odd angles. He saw me clutching Noah and the color drained from his face. "What's wrong? What happened? He's not breathing." "He's cold, Garrett. He's so cold." Francine appeared in the doorway, already fully dressed despite the early hour. "What's all this screaming about?" Then she saw Noah in my arms and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, what did you do? Call 911!" Garrett shouted, grabbing Noah from my arms, laying him on the changing table, starting CPR compressions I knew were useless. His little chest moved under Garrett's hands, but it was mechanical, empty. Penny stood frozen in the hallway, clutching Mr. Hoppy, watching her parents fall apart. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. They worked on Noah with professional efficiency, but I saw the look they exchanged. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, touched my shoulder. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. There's nothing we can do. He's been gone for at least an hour." The next few hours blurred together in a haze of official procedures and shock. The police arrived, standard protocol for an infant death. Detective Morrison introduced herself with practiced sympathy, asking routine questions. When was the last time I saw Noah alive? What time did I put him to bed? Had he been sick? Was he on any medications? I answered mechanically, still in my pajamas, Noah's blanket clutched in my hands. I checked on him at 5 a.m., but he was sleeping so peacefully. I didn't want to wake him. He'd been teething, fussy for days. I thought the extra sleep would be good for him. That's when Francine started her performance. "Detective, there's something you should know." She positioned herself between me and the detective, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper that was still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sienna has been struggling. Severely. Postpartum depression, I believe. Last week she told me she couldn't take it anymore." "That's not what I said." The words ripped from my throat. "I said I couldn't take your constant criticism anymore. You've been living in my house, undermining everything I do." Francine turned to the detective with tears streaming down her face. "You see? The paranoia, the aggression. I've been staying here to monitor the situation. My son asked me to help because Sienna was becoming increasingly unstable. She gave Noah medicine last night without telling anyone. She's been secretive, defensive. It was infant Tylenol for his teething. The pediatrician prescribed it." Detective Morrison's expression shifted subtly, her notebook coming out. "Mrs. Whitmore, were you alone with the baby this morning?" "Yes, but I just checked on him and went to make coffee." Francine was already awake. "She saw me." "She left him crying," Francine interjected. "I heard him around 5 a.m., and she just let him cry." "He wasn't crying. He was sleeping." Garrett stood between us, his face devastated. "Mom, stop! Please, this isn't helping." But Francine was building momentum. "Garrett, honey, I know this is hard, but we have to tell the truth. Your wife has been exhibiting classic signs, the mood swings, the crying jags. Tuesday at dinner, she completely broke down because Noah wouldn't take his bottle. Because you kept telling me I was holding it wrong." My sister-in-law, Bridget, chose that moment to arrive, having been called by Francine. She immediately rushed to her mother's side. "Oh my God, is it true? Is Noah really gone?" Then looking at me with something like fear, I saw her crying in her car at the grocery store parking lot last Tuesday. She looked completely desperate, talking to herself. I remembered that moment. I'd been on the phone with my friend Rachel, sobbing because Francine had just humiliated me in the store, loudly telling a stranger that I was buying the wrong formula, that breast was best, but some mothers just can't provide properly. Detective Morrison's questions became more pointed. Have you been feeling overwhelmed, Mrs. Whitmore? Have you had thoughts of harming yourself or your children? No, never. I love my children. She yelled at Penny yesterday, Francine added, screamed at her for spilling juice. The poor child was terrified. I had raised my voice when Penny knocked over a full pitcher of grape juice on the carpet, right after Noah had a blowout diaper and Francine had spent an hour lecturing me about proper feeding schedules. I'd apologized to Penny immediately, but context didn't matter now. Every normal moment of maternal frustration was being weaponized against me. The detective made a call. I need to bring Mrs. Whitmore in for formal questioning. This is now a potential criminal investigation. Detective Morrison pulled the handcuffs from her belt with practiced efficiency. This is just protocol, Mrs. Whitmore. But I need you to come with me for formal questioning. The metal was cold against my wrists, the click of the lock final and terrifying. Garrett stood frozen by the stairs, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. His mother had positioned herself perfectly behind the detective, one hand dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, the other resting supportively on the officer's arm. "You're doing the right thing, Detective," Francine said, her voice thick with manufactured grief. "We just want the truth about what happened to our precious Noah." Sometimes mothers who are struggling don't even remember what they've done. The mind protects itself from trauma. "That's not how it works," I wanted to scream at her, but every word I said seemed to make things worse. I could see it in Detective Morrison's eyes, the way she'd shifted from sympathetic to suspicious. To her, I probably looked exactly like what Francine was describing, an unstable mother who'd snapped and was now desperately trying to blame others. Dennis stood by the fireplace studying the family photos with unusual intensity. "Francine was just trying to help," he offered weakly. "She's been so worried about the baby." She barely slept, checking on him constantly, because she didn't trust me to take care of my own son. "Sienna, please," Garrett finally spoke, his voice cracking. "Just go with the detective. We'll sort this out. We'll get you a lawyer." "You think I need a lawyer? You think I did this?" The betrayal in his voice cut deeper than the handcuffs. "Garrett, it's me, your wife, the mother of your children. How can you even consider what she's suggesting?" "I don't know what to think," he exploded. "My son is dead. My mother is telling me you've been unstable for weeks, and you were the last person with him." That's when I noticed Penny hadn't moved from her spot in the hallway. She'd been standing there this entire time, watching everything unfold with those dark eyes that always seemed to see more than a 6-year-old should. Her pajamas had little unicorns on them, the ones she'd picked out for her birthday. She was holding Mr. Hoppy so tight that his worn fur was compressed into her small fist. Francine noticed her too. "Penelope, I told you to go to your room. This is adult business." But Penny took a step forward instead of back, then another. Her bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor as she walked past her father, past her grandmother who reached out to stop her, straight toward Detective Morrison. "Penny, sweetheart, go back to your room," I said, not wanting her to see her mother being taken away in handcuffs. She ignored me too. Her small hand reached up and tugged on Detective Morrison's sleeve. The detective looked down, surprised by the contact. The entire room fell silent. Even Francine's theatrical sniffling stopped. "Officer," Penny said, her voice clear and steady, nothing like the whisper she usually used around strangers. "Should I show you what Grandma really did to baby Noah?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Francine's face went from performative grief to something else entirely. Fear, rage. It passed so quickly I almost thought I imagined it. "The child is confused," Francine said quickly, moving toward Penny. "She's in shock. Children say all sorts of things when they're grieving." But Detective Morrison had already knelt down to Penny's level, her entire demeanor shifting. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What did you see?" Penny looked directly at her grandmother, then back at the detective. "Grandma said not to tell. She said Mommy would get in trouble if I told about the pillow. What pillow? The detective's voice remained gentle, but I saw her hand move subtly toward her radio. The special pillow from Aunt Bridget. The one with the pearls that Grandma keeps in her room. Francine laughed, but it came out forced and too loud. She must have had a nightmare. I would never harm Noah. Detective, you can't seriously listen to a traumatized child's fantasies. It's not fantasy, Penny said firmly. I have proof. She pulled out her tablet from behind Mr. Hoppy, where she'd been concealing it this entire time. My old iPad that I'd given her for educational games when I got a new one. She handled it with the confidence of a child who'd grown up with technology, her small fingers navigating to an app I recognized. It was a security camera app I'd installed months ago when Penny was having nightmares, so she could see the hallway and know she was safe. I couldn't sleep last night after Grandma gave me the special milk, Penny said, and my blood ran cold. Special milk? So I was watching the hallway like I do sometimes when I'm scared. I saw Grandma go into Noah's room with her pillow. Garrett stepped forward, his face pale. Mom, what is she talking about? What special milk? Francine's composure was cracking, her carefully constructed performance beginning to crumble. The child is obviously disturbed. Sienna has filled her head with lies about me. This is exactly the kind of manipulation I was warning you about, Detective. But Detective Morrison wasn't looking at Francine anymore. She was looking at Penny, who was holding out the tablet with steady hands, ready to show everyone what she'd seen in those dark morning hours when she was supposed to be asleep. Detective Morrison took the tablet from Penny's small hands with the careful attention of someone who'd just been handed crucial evidence. Can you show me what you saw, sweetheart? Penny nodded, her finger sliding across the screen with practiced ease. I turned on the hallway camera at 2:43 because I heard footsteps. I always check when I hear footsteps. She pulled up the app, navigating to the saved recordings from the night. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. The grainy black and white footage showed our upstairs hallway. There was Francine, clearly visible in her silk pajamas, carrying the decorative pillow from the guest room, the one Bridget had given her last Christmas, covered in small pearl beads that caught the infrared light. She paused outside Noah's door, looked both ways down the hallway, then entered his room. That doesn't prove anything, Francine said quickly, her voice rising. I was checking on him. Sienna never does it properly. I went to adjust his sleep position. Keep watching, Penny said quietly. The timestamp rolled forward. 2:48, 2:49, 2:50. Francine remained in Noah's room. 2:55, 2:58. Finally, at 2:59 a.m., 12 minutes after entering, she emerged. The pillow was pressed against her chest, and she was moving quickly, almost running back to the guest room. Detective Morrison stood up slowly. Mrs. Whitmore, you entered that baby's room with a pillow at 2:47 a.m. and stayed for 12 minutes? I was helping him sleep. He was fussing. Sienna had given him medicine that made him restless. Francine's carefully maintained composure was shattering. I used the pillow to prop up his mattress. He had reflux. You never prop a baby's mattress with a pillow, I said, my voice deadly quiet. You know that. You raised 3 children. You lectured me about safe sleep practices every single day. Garrett grabbed the tablet from the detective, rewinding the footage, watching it again. His face went from pale to gray. Mom, 12 minutes? What were you doing in there for 12 minutes? The timestamp matches our preliminary time of death window, Detective Morrison said, pulling out her radio. I need a crime scene unit at this address immediately. Focus on the guest room and the nursery. Francine backed toward the wall. This is ridiculous. You're going to believe a child with an overactive imagination and some grainy video that shows nothing criminal. There's more, Penny said. She swiped to another recording, this one from 3:15 a.m. It showed Francine in the hallway again, this time at the bathroom, washing something in the sink. She was cleaning the pillow cover. I heard the water running for a long time. Bridget, who had been silent until now, suddenly gasped. Mom, that pillow. I saw it this morning in your room. Some of the pearls were missing. You said you must have snagged it on something. Within minutes, the crime scene unit arrived. They found the pillow in Francine's suitcase, hastily stuffed under other clothes. Several pearl beads were indeed missing. Then came the devastating discovery. They found matching pearl beads in Noah's crib, underneath his fitted sheet pressed into the mattress. "Those could have been there for days," Francine argued desperately. "I changed his sheets yesterday afternoon," I said. "I change them every other day. You watched me do it. You said I was wasting water with so much laundry?" The medical examiner who'd been called back to the scene examined Noah again with this new information. She found tiny impressions on his face consistent with textured fabric being pressed against his skin, pearl-shaped indentations that matched the pattern of Francine's pillow. Detective Morrison removed my handcuffs. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry for what you've been through." Then she turned to Francine. "Francine Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of Noah Whitmore." "It wasn't murder," Francine exploded, all pretense finally gone. "It was an accident." He wouldn't stop crying. "I was trying to muffle the sound so he wouldn't wake everyone. Sienna had ruined his sleep schedule, letting him nap whenever he wanted. I was trying to teach him to self-soothe properly." The room went absolutely still. Even Francine seemed to realize what she'd just admitted. "You held a pillow over my baby's face to stop him from crying?" My legs gave out. Garrett caught me, both of us collapsing onto the couch. "Not over his face." "Just near it to muffle the sound, but he kept turning his head, trying to get away, and I had to hold it steadier. I didn't mean for him to stop breathing. I was trying to help. You don't deserve these children, Sienna. You never did. You trapped my son with that girl." She pointed at Penny. "And then you couldn't even raise Noah properly. He needed discipline, structure, not your weak, permissive coddling." Dennis finally spoke up, his voice broken. "Francine, my God, what have you done? I was protecting this family from her incompetence. And if that brat hadn't been spying, no one would have known. It would have been SIDS. These things happen, and maybe Garrett could have found a proper wife, a proper mother for the next children." Detective Morrison nodded to her partner, who moved forward with handcuffs. As they arrested Francine, she turned to Penny one last time. "You ruined everything, you little spy. This is your fault, too." "No," I said, pulling Penny against me, feeling her small body trembling. "The only person responsible for Noah's death is you, Francine. And Penny didn't ruin everything. She saved her mother from a lifetime of false imprisonment. She's the bravest person in this room." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Francine's lawyer tried to argue it was involuntary manslaughter, a terrible accident born from a grandmother's misguided attempt to help. But the prosecution presented evidence that painted a darker picture. They found journals in Francine's luggage, pages and pages, documenting every perceived failure of mine as a mother. Sienna let Noah cry for 3 minutes before responding. She fed him at 11:47 instead of noon. She rocks him to sleep instead of teaching independence. The entries went back to the day we brought Noah home from the hospital. Dennis testified that Francine had become increasingly obsessed after Noah's birth. She'd talked about getting custody if something happened to our marriage. She'd researched grandparent rights in our state. She'd even consulted a lawyer about what would constitute an unfit mother. "I thought she was just venting," Dennis said on the stand, looking broken. "I never imagined she would hurt Noah." The most damaging testimony came from Francine's sister, Eleanor, who flew in from Florida. She revealed that Francine had done something similar with her own children decades ago. She would hold pillows near their faces when they cried too much. She called it breath training. I told her it was dangerous, but she said I didn't understand proper child rearing. The courtroom gasped. Garrett had to leave the room. 3 psychiatrists evaluated Francine. They diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder with obsessive-compulsive features. Her need to control, to be seen as the perfect matriarch, had escalated when she felt threatened by my bond with Noah. One doctor testified that she likely didn't intend to kill Noah, but her inability to admit mistakes meant she continued holding the pillow even when he struggled, interpreting his fight for air as defiance that needed correcting. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty of involuntary manslaughter, guilty of child endangerment, guilty of attempting to frame another person for a crime. 25 years in prison. Francine screamed when they read the verdict, not in grief but in rage. I was protecting this family. She didn't deserve him. None of you understand what I sacrificed. Garrett and I tried marriage counseling for 6 months. We sat in that beige office week after week, trying to bridge the chasm between us. But how do you rebuild when the foundation was destroyed by the person who raised one of you? Every time Garrett looked at me, I saw his guilt. Every time I looked at him, I remembered his doubt when his mother accused me. We divorced a year after Noah's death, not with anger, but with profound sadness. Some things break too completely to be repaired. Penny struggled in her own way. She became selectively mute for 6 months, only speaking to me and her therapist. The weight of carrying that secret, even for just a few hours, had traumatized her in ways we're still uncovering. She sleeps with multiple nightlights now and checks her tablet camera every night before bed. Her therapist says she developed hypervigilance, a need to monitor her environment for threats. My brave little girl had saved me, but at a cost no child should bear. We moved across the country to Oregon, where no one knows our story. I work remotely now, designing websites while Penny does homework at the kitchen table. She's 8 now, thriving in her new school where she's just Penny, not the girl whose grandmother killed her baby brother. She draws pictures sometimes, families with angels watching over them. That's Noah, she tells me. He's keeping us safe now. I think about him every day, not just the horrible morning we lost him, but the 8 months of joy he gave us. His gummy smile when he first recognized my face, the way he'd grip my finger while nursing, his delighted shrieks during bath time, the weight of him sleeping on my chest. Francine stole his future, but she couldn't steal those memories. Dennis writes sometimes, heartbroken apologies on carefully chosen cards. He's divorced Francine, sold their house, lives in a small apartment downtown. He asks if he can see Penny, but she's not ready. Maybe someday. Bridget reached out once to say she was sorry for supporting her mother's narrative. I appreciated the apology but couldn't offer forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The lesson I carry from this nightmare isn't about watching for monsters disguised as loving grandmothers, though that awareness exists now. It's about listening to the smallest voices. Penny, at 6 years old, saw what all the adults missed or ignored. She had the courage to speak truth when the grown-ups were failing her. She saved me from a lifetime of wrongful imprisonment, from losing her too when the state would have taken her. Every night, I check on Penny multiple times. I watch her sleep, this brave girl who lost her innocence to save her mother, and I whisper the same thing each time. Thank you for being brave when I couldn't be. Thank you for seeing what others refused to see. Thank you for saving what was left of me when everything else was lost. Noah would have been 3 now. I imagine him toddling after Penny, annoying her with his curiosity, making her laugh with silly faces. That future was stolen from us by a woman who claimed to love him best. But in my dreams, he's there, whole and perfect and giggling, forever 8 months old, forever perfect, forever mine. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the dynamics in your own family or the importance of believing children when they speak up, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when someone unexpected stood up for you, or when you had to find courage you didn't know you had. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of the strength of the human spirit, even in our darkest moments. Thank you for listening to Noah's story. Thank you for witnessing our truth.